Well, Frank, I can't believe we're already talking about college football. My favorite thing to talk about, so I'm happy. But this weekend, Florida and Georgia both have their spring games. Let's talk about Florida first, the home team just down the street from us. What have you liked from Billy Napier and the Gators this spring offseason?
Yeah, it's a gigantic year, Alessandra, for the Gators. Everybody knows that. Billy Napier is going to be on the ultimate hot seat. The last thing the Gators need is to switch coaches again, so it's a big year. I think they seem more like a team. There's more connectivity now. He's now been there long enough that most of these guys are his guys. They understand the system. He's made a lot of staff changes to get the staff right. I think he likes where that staff is. I think he likes where that program is. I also like the leadership from Graham Mertz. DJ Lagway is going to be the quarterback of the future. But make no mistake, this is Graham Mertz's team. You could feel that. You could feel the leadership. So it's a deeper team. It's a more talented team. They're still young, but it's a deeper, talented team.
And you did hear Billy Napier speak about how he thinks they're tackling better. He thinks their leadership is better. He says all around that they have improved as a team from last season. Last season wasn't really much for the Gators. But hopefully we can see some of that come to fruition on Saturday during the spring game, and that can make some of the Gator fans more excited for this upcoming season.
Yeah, Alessandra, back in the day, and this sounds like an old guy get off my lawn moment, but back in the day you had a chance, you had 4 or 5 years at a program. You could get in there, you could get to know the players, they could get to know you, they could get to know your system. Well, that doesn't exist anymore. If you don't win in the first year or two, they want you out. So Billy Napier's an old school guy. He's not great at the portal, but he's very good at recruiting high school players. He's an old school guy that has sort of found, and that's how he's found his way. Well, that's why this year is so important. If he survives this year, they're going to be very, very good in the Billy Napier years. But he's got to win enough against a very tough schedule. This is an important spring game for them. They've got to tackle better. The last year's spring game was awful, and it was a precursor to what they would be during the season.
And speaking of Georgia, the Bulldogs are coming back, probably in the hunt for a national championship again. And who's going to be leading them? Carson Beck, the Mandarin alum.
Yeah, now this is not nearly as important a spring game for Georgia. You know what Georgia's got. The story with Georgia is they're as good as ever, and now they're mad. They didn't make the playoffs last year. They got upset by Alabama. It's a really good Georgia football team. I think in the Georgia spring game, you're going to see a lot of young players. More young players than you typically would. Typically in a spring game, you play the starters a quarter and a half, and then all the young guys get in. And if you're really good, that's what happens. My guess is an awful lot of young players play for Georgia this week.
And speaking of another team who's really mad, who didn't make the playoffs as well, as Florida State. With the college football playoff expanding, I do think we're going to see both Georgia and Florida State playing and possibly playing for a national championship. I think they're that good this season.
Florida State's their spring game's a week away. They're a week from Saturday. They're the most intriguing team in the country because they lost all those guys. They lost Jordan Travis and Verse and all those guys. So many really good players. Keon Coleman, the running back. They lost so many good players. So you assume that they've replaced them with similar players, but you really don't know that. So this is the big question for Mike Norvell. The big question for coaches these days is if you do it with one incarnation of players or roster, and that roster totally flips, can you do it with the next group? Big question for Mike Norvell. I tend to agree with you, Alessandra. I think they're going to be very good. I think they've turned the corner, but they're a very intriguing team, no question about it.
A lot to look forward for if you're a Florida State, or Georgia fan. Well, Frank, thank you so much, and that's your look at sports.